Chapter 6, Driver's Duties. Um, Hand over checklist, hydrostatic lubricator, oil engines during the operation days, hot bearings on locomotives, engine lighting, tools and equipment, emergency moving on the engine, brake test, water gauge test, using the scum cock, ash pan traps to be checked, pressure gauges to be checked, fire to be instructive, driver check to tender water engine, defects and disabling engines. Chapter 6, Driver's Duty. Handover checklist when taking over the locomotive and the light up crew. The checklist is titled Steam Locomotive Light Up and Preparation for Traffic is to be worked thoroughly in the conjunction with the light up crew, refer to Figure 4 in Annex A. Hydrostatic lubricator on the PB-15 engine that is fitted with the hydrostatic lubricator with the feed that started as soon as practical after the lubricator has been filled, so the lubrication of the pumps and cylinders will be effective as soon as possible. Lubricator feeds are to be checked regularly to ensure that they are correct amount of oil being fed. The control valve is to be turned to the westing pump, only setting when stopped. The cuts off the oil feed to the cylinder. Refer to section 37, section 8.1 and 8.13. Oil of the engines during the operating days. The drivers are to check oil cups and note that all oil to all the bearings is fed properly. The most suitable time to carry out all the oiling duties is while the train is to be stopped at Swab Bank between the runnings. Bearings to be felt exertion whether they are overheating. Piston rods should be checked to ensure that they show signs of sufficient lubrication. If the trimmings are good order, frequent oil will be unnecessary. Should the driver notice the trimming it under the overheating, he must attend the same and advise the officer to in charge, and further attention will be required. Oil must not be spilt, must be used sparingly. Oil cups must not be filled to overflowing. They are to be filled no higher than the top of the siphon pipe. Oil feeders and oil cans must be kept in clean condition. The spout of the oil feeder is not to be used to lift an axle box or idle. The spout of the oil feeder is not to be used to lift the axle box lid, as this may damage the spout and may cause the dirt to be pushed into the oil recess of the axle box. Spring-operated oil feeder should be used on the oil slide rod, small end valve motions, compensation beam pins, axle box horn checks. The bottom guide bars should be not flooded with oil, as the first movement of the cross lead will wipe away the most of the oil. 6.4. Hot bearings on the locomotive. The foreign matter getting into the oil ways commonly causes the hot motor motion bearings. Oil points and oil cans must be kept clean and free of dust and dirt. Care must be taken to not allow the broken piece of the cork to enter the oil ways. Avoid blowing down the boiler, using the crane cocks heavily in the dust area, especially in the vicinity of sand and ash, as dust must be blown into the oil bearings and other working parts. Replace missing cork as soon as possible. Keep lids closed down on oil cups and boxes. Bent pin trimmings may restrict oil flow. This may cause the hot bearings and other hand pin trimmings, which are too small in diameter, may allow oil to run through the tube freely, subsequently cause the lack of oil and a hot bearing. If the bearing overheats regularly, the locomotive and the rolling stock maintenance supervisor is to be advised. Care should be taken after the bearings are to be replaced and remetaled, as if it may be necessary for such a bearing to be run in for a period. These bearings may be checked regularly. The hot axle bearings must occur with the incorrect trimmings. The trimming should not either be too right or too loose in the texture. The water strains must continue to facilitate calipary action. Water in the axle boxes will give the false oil level. The axle boxes must be tested in syringe when the water have entered the axle box. 6.5. Engine lighting. Electrical lights are tested to ensure that they are working correctly before departing from the box. Flat side lamps are to be illuminated if operating at night. Stream turbo generator oil levels to be checked before each of the operating days. 6.6. Tool emergency equipment. Drivers to ensure the necessary tools to break down equipment that are on the engine before departing in the box flat. 6.7. Moving the engine and when about to move the engine from which has ash been standing for the long period. The driver should first warm up the cylinder's emission of the small amount of steam through the regulator with the reversing lever in the central position and cylinder cocks open. 6.8. Brake tests. Brake tests are carried out in accordance with Chapter 6 of the Operation Manual. Water gauge test. The drivers ensure the gauge glass water they are always sufficient to protect the boiler under all conditions. Both gauges, glass, and test cocks should be frequently tested on a journey to check their reliability. Refer to Figure 3A and B and Annex B. High water levels are blowing off out of safety valves that should be avoided in order to prevent priming. Using of scum cocks. Frequent use of scum cock will keep the surface of the water in the boiler clean. Ashpan traps to be checked. Ashpan traps are to be checked to ensure that they are closed properly, avoided live coals dropping on track. Air steam gauges, pressure gauges to be checked. Air and steam gauges must be constantly observed. It is important to standard main reserve pressure in the train. Pipe pressure is made that the Westinghouse pump is working correctly. Fireman to be instructed. Drivers should instruct the fireman to correct methods of firing, work injectors, dampers, and avoid excessive smoke. 614, drivers to check tender water. The drivers regularly check the tender water levels when they stop their plan water stops accordingly. The drivers to ensure the correct amounts of water treatment are added to tender when taking water. 615, engine defects. The driver noticed anything unusual running, such as the knocking sounds, excessive spark throwing, and loud, bad steaming. He is to investigate that cause and rectify the problem if possible. If the problem cannot be rectified at the time, the defect is to be noted in the currency sheet, and the locomotive rolling stock maintenance supervisor is to be advised as soon as possible. 616. The stabling engine. The driver is to supervise the fireman when carrying out the engine stability duties. For Section 513. Chapter 7. Driving Practices.